So we were on a path to pay off our home at that point, and honestly, it was only going to be like 3 or 4 more years based on my calculations and the spreadsheet and everything. So it was like
Which is
we were in
fantastic.
Yeah,
such a good
Right.
amazing.
spot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, American mindset of why not? Let's just ask for more, you know. So I'm asking God, like, Lord, can we get this house paid off faster?
Mhm.
And one of the clearer things that he's ever spoke to my heart, it wasn't quite an audible voice, but man, it was clear. And he
Mhm.
said, if you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to begin giving your age as a percentage of your income.
Wow.
And that was a new thing to me. I had never heard that. And
Yeah.
literally I remember being in that field and looking up to the sky. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, this is crazy, you know?
Do you find yourself wondering if this is all marriage has to offer? Are you so busy and exhausted at the end of the day that your marriage is the last thing you have energy to think about?
If you're wondering if God has more for your marriage, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Living Marriages Podcast. My name is Aaron, pastor and marriage coach.
And I'm April, spiritual director and marriage coach. Join us as we explore simple habits for building intimacy with your spouse while learning what it means to center your marriage on Christ.
Well, April and I are so thrilled to have two people we've been looking up to for a while in the area of finances, of marriage, of just really listening to the Holy Spirit. Bob and Linda Lotich have spent the last 15 years serving millions of people and helping them discover what true financial freedom is through their award-winning blog, seedtime.com, and Seedtime Money Podcast. And they've got a great book out as well, which we have. It's an award-winning book called Simple Money, Rich Life. Now, Bob and Linda, they're not your typical financial gurus. They are honest, open, and what really caught April and my attention is that they are spirit-led in the way that they understand and teach about money, teaching which is so full of grace, life, and hope. Now, April and I consider ourselves among those who are blessed to have learned from Bob and Linda's story and their wisdom. God has used a couple of their courses and their podcasts to give us a lot of hope and inspiration, not only about our finances in marriage, but about pursuing God's best for all of us in all of life. So, Bob and Linda, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and welcome to the Living Marriages Podcast.
Well,
Yes. Thank you
man,
for having us.
thanks for the intro. And we're thrilled to be here, excited to share whatever we can.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. We, as Aaron mentioned, you guys have been blessed, or you have blessed so many with your wisdom and your story. And especially in this area of finances, which is not something that was always your strong point from what we've heard. And so when you got married in 2005, things were a little difficult. And so we're wondering if you can share a little bit about that story with us.
You want to start us off?
So, there is nothing about me that is like, yeah, numbers are her thing. Okay. So that's what I need everyone to understand first off. So the fact that I talk about this really is a miracle of God. Because I got a D in math. My parents were livid, that's where I come from. That's my background. And so when it came to my finances, it was exactly the same way. Like I found myself in debt. I was living at my parents' house having bill collectors call me. My parents were buying my toothpaste. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, they didn't cover your expenses. No, they did. And so, I was just a mess, but I just prayed to the Lord. I was like, God, I need to marry someone who's good at math, because I didn't even have the language around help me figure out money. I just was like, I need someone who's better at me or with this, subject, with math, with numbers, with putting all these pieces together. I didn't know what I didn't know. And my knight in shining armor
Here I am.
came, Bob, who is great at math actually, but just because you're good at it in your head doesn't mean that you know how to put it to practice. And that's kind of where Bob was when I met him. Like he was starting to figure out that being able to add numbers in your head does not equate to being great at finances. And that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, yeah, because just giving you a little bit more of my backstory, right before we got married, I found myself 1,000 miles from home with $7 in my bank account, a nearly maxed out credit card, my car breaking down hours before my rent's due, And if I didn't pay it right then that day, they were going to tack on a $50 late fee, and I didn't even have the extra $50 because my paycheck was just enough to cover rent. Like
Wow.
it was something where it's like and that was my like breaking point moment where I realized I don't know as much as I thought I did. Because if you would ask me 2 days earlier, I would have said, yeah, money, I got this. I'm good at money, like, and it's actually a pretty common response, like, because we all
Right.
tend to think that we're better at it and than we actually are. And so that was my moment that led me to cry out to God and just be like, I need help. If you have a plan that's better than what I'm doing, like, I'm all ears, let's do it.
Wow. So we talk about in the world of marriage coaching and counseling and stuff that sex, in-laws, and money are usually three of the key stressors, especially in those first couple years of marriage. How is the stress of finances for you guys early on in your marriage then?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, it was intense. Like I think like I cried a lot.
Mm.
Because what happened was, what was great, the good part about it was that we quickly got on the same page, which was that Bob wanted to get our finances in order and I wanted to have nothing to do with it. So I was like, great, you're into this, take it over, just tell me what's up. Like that's where we were. So, but we were on the same page in that way, in that I agreed to do it however he set it up, okay?
Okay.
But that didn't mean I had all the money I wanted to have. I certainly didn't. I mean, we were digging ourselves out of a mountain of debt,
Okay.
and I wanted to spend money the way I had always spent it, which was spending 150% of my income. So when he's like, you can have $20 to spend on clothes for the month, I freak out a little bit. And so I think there was a lot of like, there's a lot of conversation around how to mentally handle it, I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, I think we just had to figure out what does this look like? Because any married couple knows this, is that even if you are the exact same socioeconomic background as your spouse, it's like there are very different beliefs about money, different mindsets. Like it doesn't matter. Like we all have different parents who are raised differently with different beliefs, and that impacts all of us. And so we all come at it from a different angle. And then we get married and we start, we're connected here in our financial journey, even if you keep finances separate, like there's still connections, and so it's like there's just a lot that has to be worked through. And I think the thing that we did well, that we didn't even know that we were doing, is we were actively trying to work through them. We weren't running from the conflict, but trying to work through it. And I think so often married couples realize we're bumping heads here. All right, let's just live separate lives in this area and separate it and try to avoid the conflict. And I think, plenty of things we messed up on, but that was one that I think, looking back, I'm like, I'm glad we did it that way, because now we've been able to live for a couple decades and get systems in place and get honest about these conversations and our wants and needs and desires and all this stuff, so that we're in a much better place to be able to move forward in unity, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Now, Linda, you were talking about the spending the 150% and then trying to figure out like how do we live life in a way that's financially wise and seeking the Holy Spirit in this, but also still enjoying life. And I remember hearing you guys talk about that at one point. So what does that look like to be wise, but not to be unreasonably frugal, to actually still enjoy the life that God's given you?
Oh boy. So at that point for us, what wisdom meant was self-discipline. That's just where it was. Like I was completely out of control. And so, the Bible talks a lot about that. We were just reading in Colossians 3 this morning. I was reading with my kids in Colossians 3. And one of the things that it's talking about, God saying, here are the garments that you should wear. One of them is discipline. I was not doing a great job at that. I was doing whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. Well, I loved Bob enough that when we got married, I decided it's not just the Linda show anymore, and I can't do it my way anymore. And so it really did help me in that way to realize you need to pull back the reins here. Like you really need to get in control of your own thoughts, like spending patterns, so that this marriage can work. Because I could have just done whatever I wanted. I could have kept living the same type of life. We would not probably still be married if I would have done that, because we just had such different ideas of what should be happening. So for us in that moment, wisdom looked like that. However, what was great is that Bob saw what was going on with me. He saw my effort and he worked really, really hard to try and bridge that gap. So I remember one day he was like, I've been saving money. I've set this aside. It's just been a few dollars here and there. And like, honestly, a few dollars here and there. And over a couple months' time, he had like $150 for me. And he was like, I've been saving this up for you. Like, it was just this little gift. And it was so like, it meant so much to me because I needed something like that. I needed relief. And I think that is one thing that so many people forget to add into their budgeting. Like, they go in and they go hardcore and they forget to add in, like, we need rewards in order to keep going and not feel like this is going to take forever. And so we had a system set up where it was like, once we would pay off this credit card, we would be talking about, it's going to be so fun. We want to go to this restaurant. This is what we're going to order. Like, we're already thinking about it, like looking forward to the thing that's coming up. But all the while, like, putting our nose to the grindstone and actually getting it done first. And I think in the little treat culture, like, it's really difficult to hold the treat off till the end. But for us, that was key in actually accomplishing our goals. Do you have anything to add?
No, 100% what she said. That.
One of the messages God keeps bringing back us back to in the Living Marriages podcast over and over, and I've heard it in your teaching as well, in your story, is this concept of unity in marriage. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How hard it was to get to that? It sounds like it was a struggle to get to unity in some places. And how did you see God show up there and bringing you into unity?
Well, one thing that comes to mind that is kind of an answer to your question. If it's too far of a divergence, steer me. But I remember we had one area of constant fighting. And it was the way we had set up our budget. And so this is super practical, like insanely practical, to a point where it's like, anyway, so we had set up
Like,
our budget.
people won't think that this could actually be it. That's what it means.
Yeah. So like, we had set up our budget in a way, with different categories, and we had a category for gas, like, fuel for the car, and spending money. And so it was one or two separate categories. Each one of us had one, right? Is that how it was?
I think so.
And so we had one for her. So all the gas that she needed for her car to drive, to work or whatever else. And then for my car, one was kind of that. And then our spending money for the month was in there. And we had it broken out that way. And like any budget, we had one for groceries and one for household goods and all these different things. But we had these two like that.
Well, yeah. And one little thing I want to add in, like, this, at the beginning of our marriage, things were tight. Okay. Like, we knew where every dime was going. We knew what was going on. So it wasn't like there was just like, oh, it's okay, just kind of, it'll work itself out. There was none of that. It was like, it either has to work or we're in trouble. Yeah.
So what happened as we did this, we kept on, and part of this is being young 20 somethings and naive and, all of that. But like, we kept on getting in fights over who was going to drive whose car, because the fuel, the gas money came out of these two different categories. So if I was going to drive on a date night or to church, I'm like, well, now I don't have enough money for spending money because it's coming. Like, so it was just a poorly designed kind of budget, the way we had set that up. But we were fighting all the time about this. And it's like, and we weren't necessarily super selfish people, but the system was working against us. And so we made that one change, broke it off, made gas its own category, and then our spending money, our own categories. And then instantly it resolved like 95% of money fights. Wow. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is back to the question about unity is like, sometimes there are spiritual components that need to be worked through, but sometimes it's a really simple, practical shift of how you structure the budget that can provide so much freedom and unity and just really help, know?
Wow. That's so great. We're going to, we thank you for agreeing to be part of a two-part series with us here because we wanted to get your story in part one, and we'll talk about some more of those nitty-gritty practical things in part two. So going back to your story, Bob and Linda, something that April and I, again, have just really admired and loved about hearing it from you guys and in your teaching is how in your marriage you strive to hear from God. And something significant happened. I'm Bob, looking at you here. In 2012, you heard from God about giving in a pretty radical way. It had to do with your age and it had to do with percentages. Can you share with our listeners about what that was?
Yeah, it was a turning point for us in so many ways, Aaron. Yeah, so it was actually 2011.
Okay.
So that one detail, you got to go check. I'm just kidding.
My research.
So yeah, it's 2011. Sometimes Google lies, but we lived in our old neighborhood there, and we had bought a house a couple years earlier in that neighborhood. Beautiful little starter home for us, and I'm praying in this field that hadn't quite been developed in the area. And it was this great field where it's like football field size with trees all around. So I can just walk out there and pray and be alone with God and, cry and everything else. And it's just a great time alone with him.
No one can hear him. Yeah.
And so this one day I'm praying and I'm going to God asking him, Lord, I would love to get our mortgage paid off. Because at that point we had paid off all of our credit cards. We'd paid off our student loans, our car loans. Like we were crushing it in so many ways and so many things were going great. But as I always say, I'm like an American and I wanted more and I wanted it faster, like, so we were on a path to pay off our home at that point. And honestly, it was only going to be like 3 or 4 more years based on my calculations and the spreadsheet and everything. So it was
which is fantastic.
We were in such a good spot.
Yeah.
But again, American mindset of why not? Let's just ask for more, So I'm asking God, like, Lord, can we get this house paid off faster? And one of the clearer things that he's ever spoke to my heart, it wasn't quite an audible voice, but man, it was clear. And he said, if you really want to see me move on your finances, I want you to begin giving your age as a percentage of your income.
Wow.
And that was a new thing to me. I had never heard that. And literally, I remember being in that field and looking up to the sky. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, this is crazy, And so then I started doing mental math. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm 31 years old. So that means giving 31% of our income. Like
it's a little bit more than tithing, hey?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Usual
We were
tithing.
giving probably 11 total at that point, And so
we were like, ooh, we're past tithing. Like this is, we're doing good. This is
Nailed
great.
it.
we're kind of like super Christians because we're giving 11%, And if I'm honest, like I think there was part of me that like had that Pharisaical thing of like, God, you kind of owe me. Like I've been tithing for years and we've been doing all this and And so it was such a challenge to my flesh because, I started doing the math and stuff. I'm like, I don't even know if we're going to be able to pay all of our bills. And we're definitely not going to pay off this mortgage early if I just give all this money away. Like this makes no sense. It's a terrible idea, And
This is the worst financial plan ever,
That's
right?
yeah, and so all these emotions are kind of going through my head as I'm pacing this field, and I also remember thinking like almost like some anger coming up where it's like, God, I just came to you asking for this, and now you're like taking me the opposite direction. Like this makes no sense. And so I went and asked Linda, like kind of hoping that she'd talk me out of it, type of thing, and she said, in all her wisdom, she's like, if God's asking us to do this, he probably has something really cool that he's trying to do through this. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. So anyway, so we kind of sat on that a little bit and prayed about it a little bit more. And that month we decided, all right, let's just try this and see what happens. We both felt strongly that this was the Lord and it wasn't something I just made up. I don't think the devil quite often tempts you to be more generous, but anyway, so point is we decided that month we were going to start giving 31%. And honestly, part of what that required of me was giving up my maybe even idol of wanting a paid off house and laying that on the altar and just saying, Lord, I give that to you. Like I'm going to obey no matter, what comes of this. And so anyway, so we start giving 31% that month. Not much happens. And I go back to my spreadsheet and calculate it again. It's like, all right. So now it looks like it's going to take like 10 or 11 years to pay off our mortgage instead of 3 or 4 before I talk to God. But okay, like whatever.
Thanks, God.
But we just continued giving each month. And then after a month or two, it's like, man, the business is really starting to pick up. And then the next month, it's like, we got a crazy tax refund that we were not expecting. And then it's like another thing, and like one after another after another. And by 10 months after we had started this is where it's just so, it's crazy to say this, but our mortgage was paid 100% in full 10 months later. It wasn't 3 years, 4 years, or 10 years. It was 10 months.
Wow.
And looking back, I'm like, I don't even know how God did that. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But he was so faithful, in that thing. And I'll add one last thing here. Like I thought that was initially the amazing blessing was just that he paid off our mortgage. But was so cool is that what that meant was now we had 31% of our income each month sitting in a bucket, waiting to be spent to give. And so that empowered us to be able to give in a way and have so much fun giving. Like it so radically changed our understanding of giving and gave us the freedom to give like millionaires, even though we were far from it at that point,
Yeah.
So that was like the true prize of it all.
That's amazing. And what I'm hearing in that story too is just the miracle again of your unity in Christ and your willingness to both listen to him and step into something that the world would see as completely nutso. Right? Because if you have one
we
person,
did too, but
yeah. But you both, like Linda, when Bob approached you with this, did you think at all at any point that it was crazy and that no, we can't do that? Or were you right in? Did God speak to you before that?
Well, he didn't speak to me before that, but I will say we had been through this pattern a few other times beforehand. And I think this is something that people get confused when they hear this story because it's pretty crazy. Like it's out there. Yeah. But God doesn't just come to you and just go jump off that building. Like he doesn't come tell you something that you're like he builds up your trust in that area so that by the time you get to the thing that is crazy to everyone else, you're already like, yeah, but we've done this before and we saw how it turned out. And I think that's what's so important about, the idea of the stacking the stones and like making memorials for what God has done in your life. Yep. Wow. It is easy to forget those things, but when we remind ourselves of his faithfulness, when he asks us to do the thing, we're like, oh wait, there's been grace for this before. He came through. It wasn't just completely out of, nowhere that this came up. There was a path to get there. And so he didn't speak to me about that, but he had built up my faith in a way that I was like, yeah, let's see what happens. The other thing I want to add is sometimes when people hear this, they think, well, now you have to just give your age forever. And I don't agree with that. Like, we have been on a path of giving our age for a long time. However, when that first happened, I was like, we can do this for 3 months. We can do this for a year and like reevaluate, like see where the Lord is leading us. This is not a forever commitment. It's just he's asking us to do this now. And maybe it's just for 1 month. I don't know. But if he's asking us to do it, let's take that step forward and then let's see what the next step is after that. So yeah, I don't think that people should do it, I don't think people should tomorrow start giving their age as a percentage unless the Lord asks you to. But I do think waiting for those things, like hearing him and not being afraid to step out in the thing that might seem a little crazy, but go back and look. Has he already been faithful in this area to you already? Because chances are he has. Yeah. That's what I would say.
That's so beautiful. And what I'm hearing in that and being struck by again is just how relational this all is. We talk about finances, but really this is the God of the universe inviting you into deeper and deeper relationship with him and with each other. And
I loved what you said about joyful giving, because we're called to that, right? But how often do most of us give joyfully? Not often, as often as we would hope to.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's another really practical piece of this. Like I was saying, like that, okay, so we began giving 31% of our income, but we had a structure in place. And this is something anyone can do, regardless of what you're giving. Like, and I highly suggest doing this. Create a separate savings account that each month when you get paid, money goes in there specifically for the purpose of giving.
Yep.
Because what happens psychologically when you do that is your hands get off of it. And if you allow yourself, you begin to look for opportunities. God, what do you have for me to do with this money in the account? And that is so much more fun than when you have one big bucket of money and it's like, I got to buy groceries, but man, this guy in the neighborhood has stage 4 cancer and a GoFundMe, and I'd love to give to that, but I got to buy groceries, and what do I do? Like having to do that. But when it's in that bucket, ready to be given, it makes it so much easier, so much more joyful, and it's I don't know, that was a game changer for us.
You're on the lookout for opportunities. And another thing I want to say about this is whenever, like you brought up that thing of like, we're supposed to give cheerfully. And for a long time, I felt really convicted because I was like, am I giving cheerfully? I mean, I don't know. But the thing about it is that when the Lord wants to bring correction to something, it's not because he wants to point a finger, right? The enemy is the accuser. The Bible tells us he is the accuser. God is not the accuser. So what does that mean? What is he trying to do? He's actually trying to bring freedom in an area of our lives where we are bound up because of the way the world system works. Yeah. So when we see that we can give cheerfully, it's not a thing to make us feel condemned. Rather, it's to say, that's available. Well, how do I get there, Lord? Show me how to get there. Because he just wants to make us completely free individuals. I think that on the earth, there is so much freedom available for us that if we just see the correction as a way to emotionally get free from baggage and bondage from the enemy, then we're going to see that correction so differently and be open to it and excited about it. Because I just think that it's so wonderful that Jesus already took all of that junk from us. Like, we don't have to carry it. Yeah. And so if we don't have to carry it, how does he want us to see it? Right?
Wow. That'll preach. That has preached.
It's preached to me. I mean, I love it. I once I got that revelation, I was like, oh my gosh, okay, where else do I need it? Like, it just makes you happier and live a better life and live more close to him without junk in between you and God.
Just brings to mind that verse. It is for freedom that you've been set free, and just people can't see because this is an audio podcast, but the joy, Linda, we can see it coming through the screen here, and it's it's really amazing. Well, as we mentioned, we're going to do this interview in 2 parts, so we'd love it if you'd be able to come back and maybe give us some more practical tips, some real boots on the ground kind of things, Bob and Linda. So
absolutely,
let's
do it.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. Just in the meantime, where can people find you if they've been intrigued and inspired by your wisdom?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a podcast, Seedtime Money Podcast. Also, you mentioned our book, Simple Money, Rich Life. And if you go to our website, seedtime.com/free, we actually have it available for free if you can just cover shipping.
Amazing. That's awesome.
Amazing.
Bob and Linda, we'll be back with you. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the privilege of journeying with you today as we seek God's best for our marriages.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, challenged, or inspired by what you've heard today, please bless us by hitting the follow button, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and sharing this podcast with family and friends.
You can also support this nonprofit podcast by making a charitable donation at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the life, intimacy, and connection of God's love over you and your marriage.